Hey guys, this is Matt Millard, Bowhunter Die team member, and I'm here to talk to you today about probably one of the easiest things that you can start doing on your own, and that's building your own arrows. Whether it be just fletching them or like we're going to do today, build them from start to finish. I'm going to show you how I do it, and I want to show you some of the things that I do that I think builds an even more accurate arrow. It's stuff that your pro shop's probably not going to do for you. It's something that you're going to have to do yourself. And building arrows is probably one of the best things that you can do as far as getting into working on your own equipment. Buying a fletching jig is, relatively inexpensive, and then you have a lot of control on how your arrows end up. Like this Bitzenberger fletching jig I've got here, I've had it for as long as I've been shooting archery, and it's one of those pieces of equipment that you can hand down to your kids, their kids, and their kids' kids. It's going to last forever. So let's get into it. I'm going to show you from the beginning to the very end on how to build the most accurate arrows possible. Okay, before we dive into building these arrows, I want to go over, kind of what you need, or the bare minimums. If you're starting from scratch, you've never fletched arrows, you've never built arrows, nothing. So if you just want to start with fletching arrows, that's probably the place that most people would start, and probably where you should start. The first thing you're going to need is a fletching jig. I prefer this Bitzenberger jig. They've been around for decades. They hold up forever. I mean, this is one of those things you could pass down multiple generations, I think. They are just built so well. There's other options out there. There's some stuff that you can get cheaper than those now that work okay, and there's even some that's quite a bit more expensive than this, but this does everything you need it to. You can do 3 fletch, 4 fletch, left helical, right helical, straight. You can adjust it however you want. So that's the number one thing, obviously, that you need. You need some vanes. In the past, I've really liked using the AAE Max Stealth and a 3 fletch. Well, this year I'm going to try these tack vanes, 2 1/4 and a 4 fletch. So you need some type of vanes, whatever you prefer. Lancaster Archery sells all of this stuff. Next thing you need is some of these vanes, like the tacks and some of the AAEs, need a primer pin. And even if they don't, it's kind of a good thing to have. It cleans the base of those vanes. And these certain vanes have a material that you need the primer pin to basically open up the pores on the base of that vane so they adhere really good. So if you hear people having issues with certain vanes sticking, a lot of times it's because they didn't use a primer pin. Glue wise, I'll be honest, most of the time I buy Walmart glue. I buy like the Loctite brand, that Ultra Gel Control, or the Blue Top or Blue Cap Gorilla Glue. Much cheaper than any of your fletching glues, and they work just as good. But I needed a primer pin anyway, so I just bought the little kit from TAC when I got these vanes. So got that. Basic stuff, you need some Q-tips to clean up excess glue. You need isopropyl alcohol to clean the shafts, even clean the inside of the shafts if you're going to do inserts and stuff too. But that's the basics. Now, I like running wraps on my hunting arrows. A lot of times I won't put the wraps on my practice arrows early in the year because it's kind of a pain if you have to refletch, because you got to strip all these off. But these are some reflective wraps. They light up basically like a street sign at night. It's a pretty cool deal. But if you do go the wrap route, you need some type of like mouse pad to put them on, but we'll get into that later. Now, if you're going to get into building the arrows out completely, and even if you're not, spend the money and get an arrow spinner. I think this is a Pine Ridge one, super inexpensive. I think when I bought it, it was around $20-some or something from Lancaster. I mean, super inexpensive, and you can do a lot with this arrow spinner. It'll help you in more ways than one. So those are kind of the basics. We'll get into a little bit more of this stuff as we go on. But for me, I've got an arrow here that I used last year. It's actually basically the same arrow that I'm setting up here. I'm going to do a couple things different, like I said, different vanes and such. So I've got an arrow that the length is good. Now, if you're starting out from scratch, the best way is to have somebody mark the arrow. You can put the arrow on your bow, draw it back, and have somebody mark it. I like to mark it not exactly at the end of the shelf, but maybe just back from it a little bit. Leave them past the rest a good bit to get that broadhead out, you know, kind of away from your hand a little bit. And one thing that a lot of people overlook that's super important is your vanes, where you put them as far as forwards or back of the arrow. I want my vanes as far back as I can get them without touching my face. A lot of people that are buying, you know, pre-fletched shafts from the archery shop, or the vanes on them are probably hitting them in the face, especially some high profile vanes like a blazer or something like that. They're going to be getting into your chin right here, and that'll cause you some big time accuracy issues. And if you need a reason to start fletching your arrows, just that one right there is pretty big. Between that and being able to repair arrows on the fly and not have to take them back to the shop, those two reasons are enough. But make sure you get the, you know, the positioning on the vanes right. So that is a big one. So let's start building these, and I'll walk you through how I do everything. I have an arrow here that I used last year, like I've already mentioned. So that's going to give us our length and where we need to put our fletchings and everything. I'm going to go through the process of getting these cut and how I decide what end I'm going to cut from. And this is one of the things I talked about that your pro shop's not doing for you. This is something that gives you the straightest possible arrow that you could have, you know, for the dozen that you bought. So I'm going to take these. These are Easton Axis 5mm, probably, I would venture to say it's probably one of the most successful hunting arrows on the planet. They've been around a long time and they have killed a lot of stuff. So in the package, these come with the standard aluminum hidden inserts and the 2-part epoxy. It takes 24 hours to cure. I'm not going to use these inserts. I've actually got some brass ones here that I'm going to use. But because of the insert or having to use the epoxy, I do that very last. That's the last thing I do is put the inserts in so I can let them sit the full 24 hours. So basically what we're going to do here, my arrow is usually 29 inches of carbon, and a full length Axis shaft is around 32.5 inches of carbon. So we've got 3.5 inches that we can cut from. You buy these at the pro shop, they're going to cut 3.5 inches dead off the front, no matter what. And if you're lucky and you're buying shafts, they're going to cut evenly off of both ends, which is probably pretty rare. So what I'm going to do is I take this Pine Ridge arrow spinner that I got from Lancaster, and I spin this arrow, and I'm looking for wobble on both ends, or which end wobbles more than the other. So on this particular arrow, the front's got a little, and the back's got just a little bit too. So this arrow, I'm going to mark it with my silver Sharpie on both ends. And that means I'm going to cut this arrow from both ends. And basically we're going to go through these. Some arrows are going to wobble more on the back end, and some of them are going to wobble more on the front end. And basically what we're doing here is we're going to cut more from the end that wobbles. So if I've got one that's dead straight in the back and all the wobbles in the front, I'm going to cut the full 3.5 inches dead off the front. I'm trying to cut that bad section out of the arrow. And this works. I mean, even if you buy 1000 Straightness, the most expensive arrows on the planet, you're going to have wobble. So both of these first ones have been pretty even on both ends. We're cutting evenly on both ends. So I'm just going to go through all of these and mark them, and then we'll do the next step. Okay, well, we just got done spinning all the arrows. In a nutshell, I've got 8 that were pretty even front to back as far as wobble. I've got 3 here that wobbled more towards the back end, I think. Yeah, 3 that wobbled more towards the back and 1 that wobbled more towards the front. So based off what I said earlier, we've got 3.5 inches of arrow that we have to cut off. So the next thing I need to do real quick is actually pull the nocks out of these arrows. That way it makes it a little bit easier to cut them. And what I'm gonna do is basically we're gonna cut on the ones that are even like this. We're basically gonna cut 1 3/4 inches from both ends. And then the ones that were off, more on one end, I'm gonna cut like 2.5 inches off the bad end and like 1 inch off the good end. So I'm gonna pull these nocks out. Then we're gonna fire up the arrow saw here and we're gonna get going. All right, so we've got the tape on the back of this saw. So it kind of gives you something to go off of. I'm gonna make all the back of the arrow cuts first so I can put the nocks back in and cut the rest off the front. Let's see, that's about right. Yeah, 32 5/8 roughly. So I've got all these, the ones that are even. Okay, now we have made all the cuts off the back end of the arrow. And you can tell we've got all sorts of different lengths there, but that's on purpose, you know. Now we're gonna make sure the saw is set. Yeah, it's set to the final length. Now we need to get nocks back in the back of the arrow to make this cut. But before we do that, I'm gonna take this little stone that comes with the Easton Axis arrows and kind of square off the ends. G5 makes a really good arrow squaring device. I don't have one. I used to have one. I don't know where the heck it's at, but I use this stone. It does a pretty good job of getting everything nice and square. So I'm gonna do that real quick, throw these nocks in, and then we're gonna make the final cut. The one thing I do is I like, you know, filming hunts, obviously. I like to shoot lighted nocks, and by far Luminoc is the best ones that I've ever used. Now, I like to have them in all my arrows. So I've got some fresh ones here for my, you know, my 6 hunting arrows, and then I've got a bunch of older ones here. Some of them are dead, some of them still work. But that way my impact's the same from my practice arrows to my hunting arrows. I just like to shoot the same nocks on everything. Okay, so we made our final cuts. And now we just got to go back through these with the stone again that comes with the arrows and just clean up that edge and that cut that we just made. Help square it off. And it cleans up that inside edge too, where we're using the hidden inserts, which that's going to be the very last thing we do. Because you have to use that 2-part epoxy with those hidden inserts. And they need to sit completely flat for 24 hours to allow it to set up. All right, now we got all the ends squared up. The arrows are cut. Next thing I like to do is I've got a dozen arrows here, and I always like to lay 6 of them aside as my hunting arrows, basically. And I'll pick out the 6 best arrows of the bunch. So what I'm gonna do now is go back through and spin all these now that I've cut everything off, and pick out the ones that are the absolute best. At this point, they're all really good, but usually there's a few that stand out. Now we have our 6 best arrows, or 6 straightest arrows, however you want to look at it, but these are going to be our 6 hunting arrows for the year. And I'm going to put wraps on these, okay? So I got my mouse pad here that I was talking about. I could use the Bowhunter die one I've got back here, which is really awesome if you've got a workbench at home you like to use. but I've got so much stuff on it, and it's a little easier to film it if I put it out here. So you just peel the wrap off and lay it down, and all you do is just line it up at the end of the arrow and make sure it's really even, and then you roll it, push down against the mouse pad, and then you just roll it onto it. And then I always roll it backwards to make sure that edge is laid down good. And then just finish rolling it across. And then once I pull it off, I just take my thumb right down the seam, make sure it's laid down really, really well. Just like that. We have finally made it to the point where we can stick some vanes to some arrows. So first and foremost, I need to make sure that this jig is set for a 4 fletch. I've had it on 3 fletch. On this Bitzenberger, it's one of the great things about it is it's a simple turn of a screw, and you can do 3 fletch, 4 fletch, whatever. And for the 4 fletch that I want to do, it's the 90-degree option here. The 3 fletch is 120 degree. I'm not going to touch, you've got these 2 knobs here, and you can tell I have drawn some lines on this jig for different things, but I'm not going to adjust how much offset or helical I have. I'm just going to put the 4 fletch at the same offset or helical that I've got now and see how that does. One of the things that you need to do is stick your arrow in there and figure out where you need to put the vane. So you can actually stick this clamp on there and slide it down like you normally do and see what mark you need to put the vane on. And this one I can see that it's actually the 4th big mark. It's good to mark it. That way you know where to put the vanes, forward or back on the arrow. I like all white, especially for a hunting arrow. White shows up really good, shows blood really, really well. So that's what I like to go with. We're gonna put this in here. Actually, let's do one of the ones with the wraps first. Generally, if you're doing a 3 fletch, I like to put my cock vane or the top vane in line with where this wrap says Bowhunter die. Being that we've got a 4 fletch now, that kind of isn't going to happen. So we're just going to put them on here and not worry about it. So I put the vane in there, lined up with the line that I just made. And what you do is you take this primer pin, well, don't push down on it like that. You need to push down on it, but up like this. That way you don't lose a bunch of it, like I just did. You just take a couple swipes down through there. Because I dumped so much of that stuff out, I'm going to take a Q-tip and wipe it back across. But then I like to put just a few dots of glue down through here, just spaced out. And then I just take the tip of the glue bottle and spread it out to where I've got, even glue all the way down it, but nothing excess. I don't want a ton of glue coming off of the vane. Put it against the jig, push it down on the arrow. If I see any excess come out, which I didn't there, I'll take the Q-tip and wipe it down to get the excess off. Just leave it on there a few seconds. I mean, we're basically using super glue here, so it dries extremely quickly. Well, I'm running out of time tonight, but I got about 6 of the arrows fletched, and I wanted to go ahead and show you the rest of the process here on what I do when it comes to the inserts and finishing off these vanes. Now, I take the glue, as far as the fletching goes, and then this is it, but I take the glue that we've been using, and I just take and put a dot of glue at the front and at the back of each vane. And what that does is that'll help protect that vein from wanting to peel up and rip up if you pass through a target during practice, or maybe even an animal. It'll help keep that vein on there, and it's simple to do. Just drop a little drop of glue at the front and the back, and it might save your veins and save you from having to refletch. Now the next part is we're going to do the inside of the arrow. We're going to go ahead and get it cleaned up really well. So just put alcohol on a Q-tip and then just run it on the inside of the arrow. Get a lot of that carbon dust from cutting the arrows. You can see it comes out pretty dirty. I'll do 2 or 3 on one side of the Q-tip, and then we'll wet the other side and do 2 or 3, and then we'll get a new one. The next thing we got to do is mix up this epoxy that comes with it. Now, if I was using any other type of insert besides a hidden insert, I use hot melt for everything. I use a butane torch and just a stick of low temp hot melt. I bought a box from Lowe's over 10 years ago that probably had 20 sticks in it, and I've still got half of them. And I've done a lot of arrows, especially when I was shooting target archery. I had a lot. So every pack of hidden inserts comes with this epoxy right here, and it's a 2-part. And what you do is you fold it, and I always like to push it all down to the bottom. And it's got this little perforated line on each side, and it shows you once you fold it, you just cut the corner like that, snip it off, and then you just pour this out. And I choose to do it like on a little piece of plastic here. And you just pour it all out, and it's kind of mixing as it comes out. Alright, so once we get it all out of the packaging there, I just take this thing. If you have some other kind of stick, I've actually got another pack of inserts with a tool to push these in, so I'm not too worried about messing this up. But just give it a good mix. Mix it all up real good. Now, I'm not using the standard hidden inserts, the lighter ones. I'm going to use the brass. And these are 75 grain, but they're break-offs. And I'm going to break them off to make them 50 grains. So I want a little extra weight up front, but I'm not going full fairy or anything. Just a little extra weight up front. And Easton actually done a great job designing these. All you got to do is take this insert, hold it, and you can actually grab this little back section here, twist it, and it just breaks right off. That's 25 grains gone. We just got a little 50 grain insert. So I'm just going to go through and get these all broken, ready to go, and then we're going to get them in these arrows and call it good. This time tomorrow they'll be ready to shoot. Now we have all the hidden inserts here broken off, and it's time to put them in the arrows. And it's actually pretty simple. Well, I've actually got one here that still needs to be broke off. So what you do, you can tell there's one end that's threaded. We need to make sure that end's pointing towards the end of the arrow, obviously. But just take the insert and get the epoxy on the end, and I just start it in. Then I just take the hidden insert tool here and you just shove it all the way in, just like that. And I actually like to take a Q-tip and just the very end of it there to get that epoxy out. And then the most important part is you lay those arrows flat, and they got to stay that way until the epoxy has time to cure. So just put them in there, and I just kind of twist the insert as I'm putting it in, kind of pull it out, Put them back in. I'm just trying to use up as much of that epoxy as I can. Push it in with the tool. Take my Q-tip and clean some off the end. And then we just run through them all, just like that. As you can see, I got finished there with all the inserts, all the hidden inserts, and I've got them laying flat there to allow that epoxy to set up and dry over the next 24 hours. But I had one more thing I wanted to touch on with these Easton Axis, or any other 5mm shaft for that matter that you use the hidden inserts. But these Easton Axis are a 5mm arrow, so they're a little bit smaller than a standard diameter. And because of that, you know, you can get a field point that matches up to the arrow really well, seamless transition. I think it's a 9/32 is what fits it, and that's great. But when you go, and that pulls out of a bag target really well, out of a foam target really well, it doesn't matter. But when you go to put on your broadhead of choice, a lot of those are more like a 5/16 diameter. And you can see that there's a little bit of a shoulder there from the broadhead to the shaft, which, you know, I've used them like that without an issue. But Easton makes this cool little product that's so inexpensive, it's crazy not to use it. It's called a broadhead adapter ring. And it's just this little ring that's small, it's tiny. And all it does is it slips over the end of that arrow shaft, like so. And then you thread your broadhead in over top of it, and it makes a seamless transition there. It steps that broadhead down basically from the 5/16 ferrule to the 9/32 outside diameter shaft. Makes it very, very clean. And not only that, but it makes the end of the arrow much stronger. It, you know, a lot of arrows you've got some sort of insert on the end, so when you get a hard impact, it doesn't really want to shove that point back through the arrow. But without that broadhead adapter ring, if you get a really hard impact like that's side loaded, it can kind of want to tear out the side of the shaft. I've never personally had it happen, but I've seen some pictures of it happening. And this broadhead adapter ring gives you some extra strength on the end of that arrow to help prevent that, you know, hard impacts or whatever. It keeps you from having the end of that arrow blow up on a really, really hard impact. So for no more than it costs, you can go to Lancaster Archery Supply probably and pick them up. I think that's where I got them. It's worth the extra little bit of money to add the strength and make the broadheads fit just a little bit better on that shaft. Well, that is a wrap for building these arrows. I've got 6 more left to fletch, you know, once the epoxy sets up tomorrow, but after that we'll be able to take them out and shoot them. They're basically the same arrow build as what I hunted with last year like this, but hopefully you learned a little bit of something, whether you were, you know, looking to get into building your own arrows or you were already doing it. I feel like there's some good information in there for everyone. So I've got some more stuff coming, hopefully. I'm going to do some bow setup stuff and film it and try and cover a few things between now and season. So be on the lookout for that. But until next time, bow hunt or die.